You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional love coach and matchmaker. If you haven't lately, definitely go check out the calendar at wedeepen.com. See all the up and coming social and transformational experiences. We are bringing all these experiences that can help you have more meaningful, loving relationships onto one platform. And these are experiences that we have vetted and curated. We have roped a reputation system around it. So only the best experiences. These are generally brands. They're repeating, and people love them. There's so much heart and soul that goes into them. So whether you're currently single, you're in a relationship, maybe you're at a space where you're just aiming to discover more about who you are as a person, because, hey, let's face it, our educational curriculum, of what I've seen of it, sort of neglected the topic of relationships altogether. That includes the relationship to yourself, conflict resolution, communication, authentic relating, erotic wellness, sex ed, how to be a good friend, none of that. So we're providing those spaces that you get to come into and journey through the experiences, and bonds build best over time. So you get to build deep friendships and connections with lots of amazing people who are also interested in putting growth first. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, rate it, share it with a friend. It helps more people find it and helps me continue to host it. Also on We Deepen, we have a new course, Relationship Renegades. Rachel Brooks-Smith and Emilio, they are newlyweds, and they have developed this program called Higher Love. It's a Higher Love certification that they take you through a series of activities and lessons, things that they have learned prior to meeting each other and then after meeting each other. So it's perfect if you're currently single, and it's great to do with a significant other to elevate your relational skills and provide you with a space to study love privately at home, on your own time. And the course is getting rave reviews. In today's episode, I get to pop the cherry of one of the most well-respected touch experts. I like to call her actually a vibe specialist, Aviva. And Aviva Mohilner?
Mohilner.
Mohilner. I was just telling Aviva.
I know you never have to say last.
I know. I was just telling Aviva before we started recording. I was like, you know what? You have one of those names that I've never had to say your last name. So it's interesting now that I'm going to introduce you with your last name. Aviva, this is your first podcast.
It is. I know. I'm really excited, and I'm happy it can be with you, especially since we've been on this journey together for many years now. So
I know. Back in I remember in 2019, it was January of 2019, and the We Deepen platform was getting going, and you were already held experiences. I think you probably started them in 2018, correct?
2018. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to bring them all into one platform. You're like, I'm not quite sure. And then, and then we went on the journey, and it's been, you're right, years. And Aviva, it's interesting to probably hear that I positioned you as a touch expert, because
yeah, that is weird.
But you facilitate this experience, and you've created this brand called Held, and Held is a space where people can come and they can feel nourished from platonic touch. And as we know, in the love languages, there's 5 love languages: words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, acts of service, and touch. And most people, when I speak to a lot of people, especially when I'm out and dating and asking men, what are your love languages? A lot of people have touch high on what they need. And we've gone through COVID recently, where a lot of us were separated from each other, and touch was like, don't touch each other, stay 6 feet apart, don't get too close. So, and prior to even the COVID, you know, it was I guess there was a theory or assessment that people are touch starved. And I also even remember when this cuddle app, I was living in New York City, and there was a new app for people to go and find a cuddle expert, someone who does a cuddle professional, to come over and cuddle you. And this is, you know, an alternative to say there's sex workers. And I've done a lot of work, not personally work with sex workers, but I know a lot of them. And this is just as important as that for some people.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would argue more so. And for a lot of people, you actually make me think of Trevor Noah, I guess fairly recently, said something after the show just about how much men, a lot of the time, really, when they say they want sex, it's really that they want to be held, that they want. He literally said that. I was like, hey, Trevor, thanks for the ad. But said that a lot of the time they're craving that kind of intimacy. They're craving physical connection. But the only way that we have to get it in our culture is through sex, is through intimate, romantic relationships, unless you happen to be in a touchy family or you have those kinds of friendships. But a lot of people, if you're not in a romantic relationship, it's a basic human need. And we as a culture have become so averse to it, especially now post-Me Too, post-pandemic, and then historically, just some things that set us up for a really touch-averse culture.
What I appreciate about you is that you have a deep professional background in corporate type environments where, you know, I remember when I first graduated college, which was like 2003. And, you know, you go into the office and you shake hands, maybe, but the hugging.
I never did. I was always a hugger, but yeah.
You were the hugger. So I wasn't innately a hugger, but I remember when I started to meet people that were huggers, I was like, I love this. Oh my gosh, I feel so much more connected to them. They really like me. I like them. Yeah. And there was a different vibe that happened. There was another level of trust and just a feeling of connection to someone. So you were always a hugger in corporate America?
Oh yeah. Always. I remember there was a VP of Bank of America at one point so just some context. And this was prior to those days. I was at the LA Chamber of Commerce early on. And I went in I'll tell you a story if you do want to hear one.
Give us stories. We love stories
about this.
Everyone loves a good story.
So this is where way before, it must have been 5 years before I started health, that I was in an environment where we were in a recording studio. We're meeting like the big guy in charge of some things. I worked as a contact in brand strategy and communications, and at this point was helping to launch something. It wasn't in the music space, but it involved all kinds of artists and creatives, et cetera. And so in the room were CEOs and founders, were big creative folks, and I don't even remember, but the big guy walks in, like sort of head of table vibes, and he's shaking everyone's hand on the way in. And I happened to be at the very end of the rows of people that were saying hello to him. And I'm so awkward with handshakes. Like I just can't. And I went and did the arms out, like hug motion. And he just came in for it. And was like, yes, I'm such a hugger. He had, I think it was like a Southern European kind of background or something. I can't remember. But he just went in for it. We wound up sitting next to each other. We were chatting away. He was like my boy by the end. So yeah, it was fun times. But it really sets up, at least for people who are, what I've found is for people who are naturally huggers, that it really creates a sense of connection with people and just on a deeper level, and so fast. And ones who aren't, and granted, I should preface this by saying, I am a relatively small human, a short, curly hair, big smile, not very threatening looking human. So I know this doesn't work for everyone, but with so many people, even if they're not, if they warm up to it, or if you're able to like create safety there, even they can open up and like you said, ultimately appreciate it, that they might not have thought of themselves that way, but they appreciate that kind of human connection is what I found.
Well, even too is like, I love the moments when I'm like hugging the big guy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh my God, the teddy bear is coming towards me. Thank you. And I feel like almost like the really like big guy, you're like, I feel so protected in this moment. Absolutely. It's like, he's got me. Like, yes.
Absolutely. And it feels so safe. That's the big thing, is that it has to feel like safe and like you have choice. Right. And I've been talking to some men recently because they're so nervous, like, again, post Me Too, just to do anything. And I mean, I don't have the full answer yet, of course, on how to handle that. But a lot of it is setting up that space for safety, knowing that you're not forced into engaging with someone, especially when they're that like a big bear of a person. It could go either way. And so just knowing that they're opening the door, welcoming it, a safe space for it, but not coming in for it. It's a different energy. Yeah.
So pre-COVID, I remember in Los Angeles, you were hosting Held, sometimes once a month, sometimes bi-weekly. And they were these experiences where, 30, 40 plus people would come together at sometimes private residence, sometimes in event type spaces. And it would always be cushy, comfortable, carpet, pillows, very vibed out. And you would guide the group through a series of exercises that by the end of the evening, some people would be, snuggling and just laying and connecting and talking and having fun and giggling and laughing and feeling like everybody felt very connected. Yeah. Sometimes, I remember the experiences would end at like 10, but by 11 o'clock, people are still just vibing out and hanging. And there was a community that was formed around that. And I know, oxytocins, there's a hormone in the body, a feel-good hormone that's released through that experience. And I'd love to see that Held has been coming back, and you're hosting it in Los Angeles again. And I know you have I think New York City is coming about, and looking at like, how do I, what you're looking at is like, how do I even spread this experience, Held 2.0, to the world. But before we jump into your plans for Held and what's next, why is this important to you? Like, why is this your story?
Oh, okay. Since you said you like stories. And I do have to say, just for both accuracy's sake and my own, like, for people's understanding and being able to picture what happened's sake, there were a couple of times when we had about that many, when we have 30, 40, I've done things for larger, but really the sweet spot is much smaller and more intimate. Like, I actually really, my preference, at least thus far, has been anywhere in the 12 to 15-ish range, sometimes 20, 30 kind of max. But at least a lot of the time when I'm doing these smaller Helds, it's that. And then people feel so connected as a community even after. So yeah. And especially now, if I'm doing them more frequently and they're not like a special event, then I think of it as a practice, as a drop-in, as something that I want people to be able to come to if they're, well, we can talk about that later, but I was thinking, like, if they're going through something or if they just want to expand. So anyway, but I digress.
I will say, it's like, I do like that smaller, intimate vibes. And I just had that experience with Frank Donner, who's one of my advisors for We Deepen, and he was in town for South by Southwest, and he invited me to an event launch, this company Gather. He invited me to their event launch, and it was an Airbnb. And I was looking around, and there was only probably like 12, 15 people in the space. And there was a feeling at first for me of like, oh, I wonder how the founder is doing. Is she okay that this is such a small group? But however, by the time when we all left, it was that we all had gotten to know everybody in the space.
Yep.
And it was perfect though. The more intimate type experiences, it provides the space to be able to go deeper and not feel as though you missed out. Because even some of the dating dojos, when we have dating dojos, we always want to bring in, I know I looked at like 40, 50, 60 people. Yeah. However, they always leave and being like, I didn't meet everybody in the room. So there's always a little, but if we don't have that many people in the room, then
that's a toughie. That's a tough one.
They don't feel like a FOMO. They're like, oh, I got to meet everybody. So I appreciate the smaller containers.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you, one of the most magical ones I had, we had 6 people and it was magic. Oh, it was so yummy.
That readjusting in the brain as being an event producer at times. Like sometimes we think that like the more people, the better, the greater will be. Like I want to be on stages of, everybody always, all the artists dream of like Madison Square Garden. Yeah. But those smaller experiences are actually where a lot of the transformation power happens.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Now, that said, that is not the business model. That is not sustainable as a lifestyle. So this is not the end all be all. The vision is much bigger and different than that. But imagine empowering other groups all over to be able to facilitate those kinds of things for their either existing communities or in communities that they're building. But yeah. So I can go back to your original question if you like, because it's kind of, it's a surprise to me that I'm doing what I'm doing. Like it is shocking. And the last thing I would have ever in a million years wasn't even a twinkle in my eye of thinking that I would do something like this at all. But it was 2018. I had started something actually a few years prior called Amplify Good that was all about bringing together people who worked in marketing, advertising, PR, social media, brands who wanted to use their skills to do good and connecting them with entrepreneurs, but social enterprises, nonprofits who needed the help. Right. And creating ways for that to happen. I put together some hackathons and some other events. I really wanted to build out a network. And it just wasn't jiving. Like people wanted to help. There was a need there, but something wasn't clicking. And I took my first ever breathwork class. It's a tiny breathwork class. Again, power of small spaces, and just broke down. I was laying on the floor. I still remember looking up at the ceiling and weeping, like ugly, heaving, crying, and just pleading like, I've never prayed this hard. Just God, I need you to show me. I need you to show me how to use my gifts. And I saw like speaking and who I am as a person. It was just like loving, nurturing, how I can use that to make a difference for people because I'm done. I can't figure it out. I'm done trying and I don't even want to be here. Otherwise, I'm so purpose driven. I was just like, if I can't get this, what's the point? And literally within a minute, it just came down like a lightning strike, fully formed. It's called Held. It's about creating a safe space for human connection through guided touch. I saw eye gazing, deep hugs, like spooning on the floor. And I came out of it and was like, so I guess I have to do this thing. And I went through spikes of excitement about it and like deep dread and was just like, I don't want to be the touch girl. I do brands for good. I'm using business to do good in the world. And September of 2018, we were coming up on Burning Man. We were coming up on especially on the high holidays. I'm Jewish. And for those that don't know, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is a time of, it's the new year, but it's a time of reflection on the previous year, atonement for where you might have fallen short, setting yourself up for the next year. And I was just like, I cannot go before God another year and be like, sorry, dude, I know I asked for the download and you full on gave it to me, but I was too chicken shit to do anything about it. So I did my first held with 2 weeks notice with Nadine, who was like just a beautiful, beautiful soul. Again, another story there, but yeah. And that one well past sold out. Like I hustled and we had 30, maybe almost 40 people at that first one. And then I didn't stop. So I've done about probably around 50 of them now. And sorry, that keeps dinging. I don't know how to turn that
Wow.
on.
I'm not hearing the dinging.
Oh, okay.
When you were, when that vision or epiphany or download came to you, what were you seeing in the ethers that, like, how did you know that this was wanted? Because I mean, God was touching and telling you, but like, did you go through a period of time where you felt touch starved, or were other people telling you stories that they weren't receiving touch? And if not then what are you seeing? Like,
yeah, it's so funny. Thank you for asking that, because it's an interesting way to ask the question. I hadn't thought about it quite in this way. But at the time, no, I had none of that, right? No awareness. There was no product market fit thinking that went about this. It was just, I was so desperate, and I knew where my heart was, and I knew the answer that I got when I asked from a really deep, deep place. And so I knew there was that. And it wasn't until after the fact, and when I started doing it, that the pieces started making sense. In that people would always tell me, because I was always a hugger, and I knew my personal experience of people appreciating that. And I knew my personal experience of people saying, oh my God, I haven't had a good hug in so long, pre-pandemic. And so I knew that was a thing. And then only in retrospect thinking, my dad never touched me. Like, it was that I had zero, like, to this day, hugging him is like hugging a rock. Love him to death, warm, wonderful human, but engineer, raised in the 50s, like not the guy. And so I realized I had never had purely platonic, like, warmth and affection through touch especially from a man that wasn't sexually charged, and being bi, frankly, with women, I didn't want to violate anyone. I didn't ever want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. So I held back even as huggy as I am, I still had some of those sticky areas. So it's been a journey for me, and a personal healing. I guess they say you teach what you most need to learn, or every therapist is the one who needs a therapist. Mm-hmm. So that was, I think, in large part the case for me. And ever since, I mean, I've seen at the time when I started doing it, the response, especially from men around, I would say, nurturing non-sexual touch. I've only recently started using the term platonic touch instead. But they would far more often than not say non-sexual touch. How can you have non-sexual touch? Like, that's not even a thing. Right. And now post-pandemic, people get it. Like, it's a thing. And it's something that people get, but we haven't given a good answer to how to make that happen yet. So I'm really wanting Held to open up those conversations and normalize it. Not saying Held is always the answer, but that this is the space to start those conversations and start feeling into those practices.
I love that you said conversational starter, because to be in spaces where we even talk about this yesterday, or this past weekend, I was with a girlfriend of mine, and she shared with me that she hasn't had sex in 6 years. And I can see in her eyes that there's also there's a longingness for intimacy.
Yeah.
And she lives in New York City. There doesn't seem, there's not, where do you go for that in between to just feel that sense of nourishment and connection? Kind of even that time, because, you know, you think of, sometimes we go straight, Laura Anana says, you know, we go straight from talking to fucking, but there's all this space in between. And that's even sometimes those moments, and I know you've done some helds where you've done movie nights, just those times where you're just sitting on the couch and relaxing with somebody. And sometimes in between of like the whole dating process, and, you know, because I personally don't want to be sexual with most people, like most people. I mean, it's very rare that I meet somebody that I want to do that with. But in those times, I personally have gone a year and a half without sex. And thank goodness I've had access to this work through those periods of time, because it's nice. I never really had to feel like, because these hormones that the body is releasing, these are feel good hormones. Yeah. And to just rely only on sex or only on people that you're intimately attracted to and may have sex is a lot of pressure, and sets you up for a space of being in loneliness and feeling deprived from it. And as I mentioned, these apps, like the Cuddle app, you know, is in existence, but like those can be risky a little bit. You know, you at your home by yourself ordering a cuddleist to come over. You're not quite sure, but here's in a safe container, a space that you provide for people to do it together.
I mean, you bring up in that bit that you said, there are so many things that I kind of want to address. Please. There's just so many things. So in chronological or reverse chronological order, let's go chronological. It's first the mention of intimacy and craving intimacy. And there's both the physical. I want to be clear about what held is and what the intention is, because there's the physical desire for intimacy, for touch. And there's also, I often talk about held just being about feeling seen and heard and held. And so there's a lot that happens with sharing. So a bit different than like cuddle parties, in that the exercises, because it is a guided thing, that the exercises really are about sharing and using touch to deepen that kind of connection, again, in a platonic way. And unlike, say, authentic relating, for those who've done that, it's, you have some of that connection, but in an authentic way that again uses touch to deepen. So all of that to say, just I noticed it. I noticed myself as you were saying it just about touch, that it is so much more than that we crave the physical, and we crave someone to listen and to just ask, how are you really? And give you the space and the presence to be able to answer that and share that. And then imagine that you have that with someone who also then can give you a really good hug at the end, you know, like that's kind of my intention. So there was that. And then that actually speaks to what you were saying about professional cuddlers. And I would also bring up the idea of cuddle parties. There's a cuddle industry, the way that you have the connection industry. There's a whole cuddle industry. I am not part of that. I don't consider myself really part of that per se, but I'm happy to refer people to those things. I really want to be a bridge for people who might be interested in that, or a place to be able to send those folks if they come and they're not for this, because there is a real need for like those professional cuddlers. They've been trained. they have like a code of conduct and a code of ethics and a whole contract, the same way that you might, I don't know, in kink or something. They have like a whole thing, very specific container that they create, which is beautiful for people who haven't had touch, who don't necessarily trust, who wouldn't even potentially be comfortable coming to what I do, but who might want that need met and help bridge that gap, or who might have some other reason why they'd want that. So I think it's a really beautiful service. And if those who are listening might be interested, it's usually, I think, around $80 an hour or something like that. They're at Cuddlist. I'm not being paid or have any kind of relationship with the company. I just think it can be a valuable service. And there are lots of professional cuddlers out there. Same with cuddle parties. They can be great too. But there are ways of getting those needs met. It's just, again, it goes back to me, the conversation around normalizing it, around we need this as humans. We're not getting it. How can we create those kinds of relationships, whether it's through events, through professionals, or ideally in my world, it's wanting to get people to bring this stuff into their lives and be able to create friendships and relationships. And even, I brought it into my personal relationships with male friends to say, like, look, sometimes I just want to cuddle. Like, are you into that? Yeah. And more often than not, men a lot of the time just want to curl up on the couch and watch a movie at some point. So establishing that can be part of our relationship. And then I can reach out and say, hey, I really just want to curl up on the couch and cuddle. Do you want to like watch a movie or something? And then that can become part of what gets that need met. But it's by having those kinds of conversations that we can create like our own context in our life for it, our own containers in those relationships.
I love this too, because it's people get to go on, it's part of the journey of self-discovery, because we all have a different like spectrum of touch that we need in our lives. And it might change in different periods of time where you're at in your life. I tend to not be, I remember when I was a child and sometimes my mom would go like to rub my back and I would like squirm away and be like, yeah. Fine. And I move away from that. And there's other moments in my life where I feel like, I want to lay up on the couch. And sometimes I think that it can be there's like, it's like a knowing. Sometimes there's ego that's blocking us from entering into those experiences. And sometimes it's like, oh, this is just myself. But what I love about you provide is space for discovery. And also the layers of removing back of like who you think that you want to be cuddled by and who isn't. What does it mean? Because as you said, cuddling with your friend, sometimes I would get in space. Oh gosh, if I cuddle with my friend, he's going to think that I want to date him and then I want to have sex with him. And then, oh, I can't do that. And just too much pressure with inside of that. But also and I hear of what hell does provide. It's also guides people through authentically communicating, hey, this is it. There's nothing else beyond this. This is actually just open for that. Like, we don't need to go into penetrative sex. This is not an orgy. It's more of like, hey. Yeah.
We don't even need to make out. Like, we specifically, it's like, there's this specific thing around, yes, emotions may come up. Yes, physical attraction, sexual energy, all of these things may come up. We also have the ability to like control that and decide that in this space, that's not what we're doing, right? Do whatever you want in other spaces, but in this space, that's not what we're doing. And I really believe that can be brought into your life, and that so much of it has to do with having that kind of, frankly, brave communication.
Couples, so my work, prior to We Deepen, and what kind of was the catalyst into We Deepen was hosting dating events for a couple years in New York City, underground, unattached. And I remember I was like 2 years into it and was out at a New York City party, and this couple said to me, well, don't forget about us. The only thing that's being marketed to us is therapy or sex parties. And
Oh.
and I was like, okay, you're right. Yes, I'm not going to forget about you, because couples definitely need spaces to deepen their relationship. And I can see, and I imagine you've had couples come together
Oh, yeah.
to a held, and that experience for
Great.
them, it helps them probably, I imagine, move through these illusions of jealousy and for fear of the partner, but they're getting that like excitement almost in their relationship without having to bring a unicorn or having to have a threesome. they're essentially, it's a safe space, and it's again platonic, but they leave feeling as though they got a more of an intimate connection to community and other people. Can you speak to what you've seen of couples coming through the experience?
Oh, yeah. It's so great. I've seen, I actually just had, and not this past held, but the one before, two helds ago, a guy came who is married. His wife is actually out of town and is apparently a bit less naturally touchy than he is. And he really likes going to these kinds of things. But he came and he brought his wife the following week. And they both had a great time being able to both connect with other people. I think they did one of the exercises together, because there are some that it's kind of nice to do. And you can do either with your partner or someone else. But then to me, again, the beautiful thing is that you're then able to take that experience and bring it back into your relationship. So there are a couple things that I do in hell that you might, that are so simple, but you would never think of just doing in your life. Right. And so they can take that and bring that in, as well as in the immediate moment, being able to talk about their shared experience the same way that they might if they brought in a unicorn or something and they have to have, but that's a whole other level of communication. This is just being able to share something that's really wholesome, and that's also just edgy enough that it can add some interest and excitement. Yeah. That said, I will say it may or may not be great for all of them, because I actually have had, maybe they weren't couples, but I've had people who came on a date, and that was a good sign that we'll just say that this wasn't the person for them, based on their response to being in this kind of space. So,
oh God, so smart. So smart.
Join at your own risk. Join at your own risk, baby.
Oh my gosh, it's so smart to take a date there. Like one of the first dates, any of your dates. It's beautiful to be in that experience and to see how another person navigates to have a facilitated date with others as well. You mentioned, as we were, before we push record on this, that you definitely want to talk about kindness and compassion. And I imagine there's something that through this practice that helps to elevate that experience for somebody. So I want to get into that. And I imagine that correlates with the benefits. I brought up oxytocins being released, but can you speak to some of the benefits of going to an experience like held?
Oh yeah. So we'll say benefits, and then we'll talk kindness and compassion, because that is so important to me. But benefits in terms of touch and this type of connection, and also just having someone hold space and be present with you. So purely touch, I mean, it's been shown study after study after study that it releases oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, all feel-good chemicals, reduces anxiety and depression. It's been shown to improve sleep. It's even shown to reduce pain and the pain response in the body. We've got the loneliness epidemic. That's as bad in terms of health effects as smoking, obesity, heart disease. There's so many reasons why we should be having physical contact with other humans, especially caring contact. They've even shown just like small touch with strangers can make a difference in terms of elevating your mood. and and not to encourage people to touch just to make money. But I will say that there have also been studies that have shown that servers who just even lightly touch someone on the shoulder get higher tips. That doctors who have touch in their interactions with patients get better reviews from patients in terms of the care that they're receiving. So, yeah, again, I don't know where things would stand, in a Me Too environment. So there is that need to be careful of that, but it's also just recognizing that as humans, we want and need that. And that if we're at least given the sense of having sovereignty in that and control of being able to say whether it's wanted or unwanted, that it's a basic human need and that we respond positively to it for the most part. And does that answer that part of the question?
Yeah, that does. And I also, with the Me Too stuff, just to make sure that we do touch on that, I think that each individual person,
no pun intended. Yeah.
Each individual person can check themselves. Like if your touch is coming from a sexual space and you do not have a sexual relationship with that person, then don't touch. But if it's coming from a pure, it's kindness. You want to go into kindness. Like we do, touching someone on the shoulder and congratulating, high five, giving them a high five, asking to as you gave the sign of you opened up your arms to give a hug. Someone can make a decision and choose whatnot. But for the most part, most people are going to you're going to get maybe 1% might swap your hand away. But they're in their own thing. It's not about stopping connection because you have fear to connect. It's more about if you are aiming to connect with somebody out of love, like the pureness of love, then most likely it'll be received with grace. Yeah. So I would say do it versus not doing it, and do it again. Check yourself and make sure if it's coming from a place of purity, you're good.
Well, yes, absolutely. Agreed. And I'll just have one build on that because I was just having this conversation. I just gave a talk about more around the history and science around platonic touch and how we got so off track, et cetera. But one of the questions that I got was around this area, and then a few other guys actually piled on with, well, what do you do if that, in that situation? And if you're going in for it, and I think one of the keys, and again, something we don't talk about, is that it comes back to noticing, listening, really paying attention to the person in front of you. If you see that there's any resistance, don't go in for it. If you go in for it and there's any kind of pullback, pull yourself back. If you go in for it and there's pullback and or words said that someone was uncomfortable, which a lot of people, and I'll say especially women, won't even give voice to that, which is why it's so important to actually notice. But then it's so, the fix, at least with most people, unless they're really looking for, to make someone guilty of something. But for most people, it's just, oh, I'm sorry. It seems like I might have offended you. I didn't mean to. I just want you to know. It's going straight to ownership and taking responsibility for any discomfort that you might have caused, and let them say, oh, no, it's fine. No, it's good. But noticing that, and that can diffuse it. So to your point, I would say if you're feeling it, check your intentions. It doesn't even have to be from pure angelic love. It can be from wherever it's from. Just don't bring the smarmy. And then notice the actual response of the other person as opposed to just taking, and be really quick to apologize if there is any resistance there, and just know, most of the time it'll be quickly and easily forgiven. And then it creates more connection because now you've actually had a real interaction like you've had real talk as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say to men, when they're worried about being creepy, and I'm like, well, are you a creep? And they're like, no, I'm not a creep. I'm like, okay, then you can't be creepy if you're not a creep.
I love it. Accept it. Anyway. Yes. Yeah. It really is checking with your intentions, I think.
Hmm. So
I'll say one last thing about it that's kind of not fair. And this gets said, but I want to acknowledge it because I know there are men thinking this. Like, it's not fair that things are okay if a woman's interested, because it's kind of not fair that we allow things from those we're interested in and then shame and get angry with people or not. So I know it's natural, but I just want to call that out because a lot of men will say like, well, why should I have to do that? Anyway, but I digress. That there was something, there's some succinct way of saying it. That there was some other podcast I was listening to, I think, where they said it well. But that it's only unwanted if you don't want that person, or something to that effect. Yeah.
Well, I think that maybe then is speaking to this idea of,
I think I'm putting my foot in my
only
mouth, actually.
One, like only one, like of, Esther Perel talks about how, we're seeking in one person what we didn't have in a village. Like one person can't be your one all in everything. You just find one person that you're going to hug. That one person is going to give you all your touch and all your love and everything. And you only need that one person. And I think when there's times of when somebody is, number one, I guess when someone's currently single, they are then searching for this one person. So if you're not that one person, or they don't think you're that one person, then no, get away. And then also too is this sometimes in the relationships that we have created of this idea of thinking that this one person is going to fulfill everything, then we have this kind of innate jealousy that, oh my gosh, I don't want my partner to be hugging other people. And so I'm not going to hug anybody else. And if they're hugging me, and it must mean they want something else. It's kind of even come back to a place of like friendship, because our educational curriculum didn't teach friendship either. And friendship does come from that space of really pure, like there's a pure love to it. And of course, we don't have to necessarily go into like every interaction needs to be from a place of pure love, but underneath it all, why not?
Absolutely. And that is that's where I want to get to. Yeah. That, again, that's where it speaks back to the kindness and compassion piece. Like on the surface, a lot of this, we're talking touch, but underneath, for me, it's about how can we be better humans with one another? Like, how can we support one another as humans? Just knowing, I frequently will say, like, humaning can be hard. Like, can we just be softer with one another?
You mentioned that you did this talk recently, and you spoke to the history of how we got here. How do we get in this place? People are touch starved and deprived. What did you learn? What did you speak about?
It's so interesting. So I've always been really interested in history, and I'm especially because I'm kind of a contrarian, and I'm looking for like where things got all screwed up and misinterpreted, and how that like led to this other ripple effect of now being in places where it's like, that wasn't the intention. So just as I'll say one example, quickly through, we'll say 3 points that just in the 20th century in America. So in the 1920s, there was something around in this idea of behaviorism and how how children are raised, and that you can, that one of the biggest parenting, the parenting ethos of the day was don't touch your children. Don't touch them. Don't cuddle them. Don't respond when they cry. It will make them needy. We want them to grow into productive citizens who can handle things on their own. So don't touch your children. If they do an exceptionally good job, you can pat them on the head or give them a handshake, right? And now we know that is no way to be with babies and children and raising them. But that's where a lot of our generation's parents or grandparents were raised in that way. So there was overcoming some of that. That there was in the 50s, a lot of people know about the Red Scare, right, with communism, but haven't heard about what they now call the Lavender Scare, which was a whole thing about homophobia and about homosexuals being wrapped up with communists in terms of deviant behavior, and that they could be easily corrupted by the Soviets and disrupt American culture, potentially brought in as spies, et cetera. And a lot of them were fired from the federal government just for being gay. And so people would hide any kind of affection between men. Up until relatively recently, men have very affectionate friendships. You read some letters from even Teddy Roosevelt to friends, and they sound like romance letters. Mm-hmm. You look at old pictures of men sitting together and they're like on each other's laps, arms around each other, et cetera. To our eyes today, it looks like they were absolutely gay. But a lot of that was just affectionate male friendships. Some of that, and I'm not saying this is all due to it, but this is just an example of how we stripped out men being comfortable with touching men in our culture, that any of that was hunted down and assumed to be assumed that you were homosexual and therefore deviant, and there were all these laws against that, et cetera. And that if you want one last one, is this kind of what we were going for?
Yeah.
So another, just when we look at how touch got stripped out of schools, is if you go back and track back to the early 80s, when punk rock was starting, or heavy metal was really starting, and Dungeons and Dragons, and people were all freaked out around video games, et cetera. There was this idea that started spreading around this idea of satanic panic. You can look it up, like the satanic panic of the 1980s. And out of that, I don't know if you would remember this at all. I give away my age when I say I was like little when it happened, but there's still like a weird ancient memory of the McMartin preschool trial that happened right here in Manhattan Beach, where I think it was 208 accusations of satanic pedophilic rituals being practiced on 208 accusations against 4 teachers at this one preschool. And a lot of it, if you track back, goes back to this book that was published in Canada. It became a bestseller. It talked about this woman's, I say in air quotes, memories of having some of these things done to her. Anyway, it just took over. It was a huge trial. And these kinds of accusations and trials started showing up all over the country. And there was this whole hysteria almost about teachers and pedophilia and Satanism and these rituals being practiced on kids, and there was never any evidence found. But out of that, it became taboo to touch kids at all. And there were, again, a number of other layers to it, but just we had these cultural moments that shifted behavior, and then we continue to get the trickle down.
Wow. It's like the light became distorted.
Exactly. So I'm just in the beginnings of starting work on a book that's related to this. So I'm just in the beginnings of trying to pull these threads for myself to understand how did we get here? Like, what is this about? Why in American culture, they did a study that looked at how many times people touch one another in a cafe, like over the course of an hour. So you're sitting, you're having coffee in a cafe there for an hour. And they looked at cultures all over the world. And I'll try and remember my figures, but just as an example, I think it was Florida, we'll say London, and was it London, Paris, San Juan, Puerto. I'm going to try and remember the numbers. That in on the extremes, London 0 times, Florida was like 2, and Paris, I think it was 108 or 110, and in Puerto Rico, it was more than 200 times in an hour. So I say that to say that we know that some cultures are touchy and touchier than others. But why is that? And trying to understand that, because clearly it's not a human thing that we're as averse as we are. So yeah, trying to understand that culturally, not to mention that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you could even get into, the circumcision and see how that even is connected to some of this entire process of, and babies. If you think of like, the babies in love, it's like, okay, so a human is born into this earth naked. They're then taken and their skin is then usually placed upon their mother's skin. Hopefully she's not wearing some type of gown, but she can feel skin to skin contact. And then that mother is holding that baby over periods of time to show love to it. And with the father, and that's, I think, of the where I see love has been distorted to some extent within this entire process, because that's how we give love and feel nurtured and feel connected by a world that can be quite dark. And so if you don't have that space to go, that is where you spoke to of the benefits of touch, is it can actually help to alleviate depression.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
humans' greatest achievement is interdependence, not independence. It's this process of us coming together and being together. And so the most intimate ways, and we have a mutual friend who was sharing with me that her significant other is part of a men's group. And these men, they're somewhat, these are successful men in their own right, for sure. And she said, don't tell anybody, but in their men's group, they actually cuddle sometimes.
Yeah. But it's the don't tell anybody piece. Like that's, and I get it because of where we're at culturally, but that's why we should, like, that's why it's unhealthy. I was talking to someone else who has a cuddle space in their home. And this is not someone that you would ever expect, that like this is a corporate executive. And her teenage son will use it with his friends because he's seen it modeled with her and her friends, and it's not weird. So
it would actually probably slow teen pregnancy down.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't thought about it, but absolutely. Yeah. We need a campaign for that. We need bumper stickers.
Just for the first time thought of that, because I remember as a child, it's, first off, they neglected, sex ed, they taught sex ed, but it was very generic and very basic. And so I had sex for the first time at 15, 16. And, it was the love of my life. And, but we were young and horny, and that's eventually where we got. But then it was just us, and he ultimately ended up cheating on me. I'm like, Annie, I think like 17, 18-year-old. And I'm like, forever and ever, just us. And that That didn't happen. But if there was a space in between, this is like the space in between. Alora also talks about Alora, who Nana, I mentioned her a moment ago on this podcast, and she's probably about 3 episodes prior to this one, Dating in the Mythic Dimension. And she talks about, when she has one rule when she's connecting for the most part now, and it's no liquid. She doesn't do anything liquid. She will even do one-on-one work, and she'll, facilitate group experiences. And that's the rule. Nothing, no touching that creates any type of liquid. So no kissing, no genitals, no nipples, anything that can create liquid, none. But other than that, everything is open.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. In theory, in my mind, it's like certain things might still be allowed. I don't know. but no, I love that. I listened to that podcast, and I really appreciate where she was coming from, and it's a very similar idea of that in between space. And hers, it sounds like, is much more in the sensual realm, which I think there's absolutely 100% a place for, and is beautiful. And this is in the opposite realm of that, in terms of being able to have those needs met in a non-sensual even way. So it's non-sexual and non-sensual, because ultimately it can become that, but just sometimes being able to have that like comforting feeling. I can't tell you how many people have said, like, I don't know, I just want to be held. Like, I just need to be held. Yeah, there's so many people don't register until day of, because they're just feeling it in that moment.
Yeah, I know sometimes too, like taking somebody's hand can feel intimate. I remember there was a guy I was dating in New York City years ago, and I held his hand on the street as we were walking, and he like shook my hand away, and he was like, "No, I don't hold hands." And I remember I was like heartbroken in that moment, because it was like, so I felt like I was shamed for wanting to hold his hand as I walked down the streets, and he had created some other story of what that action meant. But for me, it was so pure of just holding the hand. So I did get a little concerned with holding people's hands for a bit of time. And this was somebody, I mean, we were going on a date. Like, it wasn't even a friend. And so I do want to hold my hand's friend sometimes, especially, there's those moments where we always do it at, let's say, concerts or a festival, and you're, needing to move through a crowd. And so you grab your friend's hands. But I have some of my closest friends that it's nice to just be a female. And I consider myself like straight. I'm not even bisexual, but like
which is crazy to me.
It's crazy to you that I'm not bisexual?
Crazy to me. I can't even understand it.
Tell me more.
But, well, we can come back to that in a second, but I do want to say, just with respect to the hand holding, because you and I had almost mirror image experiences of one another. So I'm over here with this giant shock and please look on my face. And that is, mine also happened in New York, also walking down the street with the date. However, ours was that he went out and took my hand as we were walking, just casually walking across Union Square. I think it was one of those. I
was in Union Square too.
Anyway, see, was it on one of the? Why am I blanking on the name of what it is when they have food and stalls? Anyway,
the farmers market.
Farmers market. Why could I not think of those words? Anyway, so we're walking across Union Square. I remember it was a cold day, and he reached out, he grabbed my hand, and my entire being just like melted. And I was in shock at the same time. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I just held back, because held his hand back and felt so warm and comforted, because that was the first time that I had someone who just casually reached out and held my hand. And I was in my late 20s. And because everything had been sexualized for me. I hadn't had just that tender stuff from a man. I won't say it's the first time. I think, I had with a boyfriend, but just in terms of like just going on a date and it being that. So the flip side is it can be beautiful and good and really impactful. And I didn't realize how impactful that was for me until after held. And I started tracking back my experience with touch. It's like my experience with eye gazing. The first time I ever eye gazed with someone was in a personal development course, and I nearly fainted. It was this tall, big, kind of attractive guy. And I could not, I dropped to the floor at one point and was like still looking up at him, but I just couldn't even handle it. So,
well, my guy was the same guy who, when we ended our connection, or we met up at a restaurant and he had brought the stuff that was at his house. I've completely forgot about this. He brought the clothes that I had at his house, and he just pretty much put them in a plastic bag and just balled them up. And I was like, really? Like, this is how you're giving? And this was like a successful, handsome, like we had mutual friends type of guy. And this was like our second time having like a casual dating experience, but it was, to me, it was, it was like an unkind experience in the end, and very, it's very strange, especially because I know of who he is in the world, and you wouldn't think that, but it's this, I think confusion around, this is all the confusion around when, I guess we were not quite sure how to communicate. Must have been things that were happening for him that he didn't know how to communicate. And so it came out in these disordered ways, or he had this idea of who I was going to be in a specific scenario or situation.
Yeah. I think it's oftentimes just in addition, that people just don't know. I think a lot of the time people don't know. We're not taught how to be with one another, to your point, and things that are assumed as bad by one he may not even have realized. Now, granted, that was pretty awful. Like that's a pretty awful example. And also, he may have just never been corrected around that, may have never been had it expressed that like, that's not okay. And here's the way that would be. I don't know. That's just my thinking, but he could also just be a horrible person to date. Cause that's it.
I saw he's married now.
Anyway.
So why is it hard to believe that I'm not bisexual?
Oh, well, so ever since I really came out as bi, and I'm very comfortable with saying it now, but ever since I came out as bi, I have to say almost no women are actually straight. Like, fully. Most women, and the way that I think about it really is on a spectrum in terms of that if I'll say almost no women have at least not fantasized or wanted to be with other women or tried it and enjoyed it. Maybe they still want to be in a relationship with a man and they can't see themselves doing certain acts with another woman. But almost all of us have been like attracted to and wanted to or have been with somebody else. So it's especially surprising for you, and just knowing you and how open you are to all the things and the spaces that you're in. It would be shocking to me if you haven't had any of that. It's okay if you don't take the label, but.
Well, no, I've actually only really kissed one woman, Vanessa, who passed away in 2021. She's actually, her story is one of the podcast episodes, and we kissed during Truth or Dare. Okay. I think for me, I don't necessarily have fantasies about being with a woman. I am seeing somebody, and he, he's kinky, and he recently was asking me, of like, well, what's your fantasies? It's interesting. It's like a continuous conversation with us. And there is a piece of me that's like, oh, well, show me another world. Like I don't necessarily want to be like, not that I don't want to be, my innate state. I'm so satisfied and feeling fulfilled with life as is that there's probably, it's like when somebody, you don't know that you want to go to Italy, and then someone's like, I'm going to take you to Italy. And then they show you Italy, and then you see this new museum, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like someone shows you a whole new world. I often say too, I said I went to an erotic cabaret, and it was like, write your fantasies. And one of mine was like, well, if Henry Ford would have asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. They wouldn't have said cars because they didn't even know cars were available. So for me, in my, I guess what I've been, and we deepen, we have been, getting, I guess, bolder maybe now of sharing experiences. Like on the calendar right now, there's Hedone, which is an adult central retreat. And
I was just going to say, talk to me after Hedone.
Yeah, I'm going. I'm actually facilitating something there. And then also Yosef is having his mystery night. Right. But I think for me is what in the podcast two before this one is released is it with Lola, the founder of Hedone. She says, to explore your sexuality, and I don't think that this is necessary to do. She does say find a partner who is aligned with you. And for me, that I know that not everybody needs a partner to explore their sexuality or explore experiences. I think for me, what's always been true is like, I've been curious to have a companion that I feel safe, which for me would be with a man. And then with that experience to be able to journey with him to have new experiences. And potentially that is in, playing with other people or having these other experiences. We did go from, by the way, held, which is completely platonic touch, and now we're going into these other realms of sexuality. This is the conversation starter. This is how we get to dive into these, and I think sexuality is interesting to be explored. And so, I don't feel like a draw to women sexually, but in the curiosity with a particular partner, that desire I think can be created through trust of my togetherness with somebody else in a deeper exploration.
Yeah. I wish you so much luck, love, joy, exploration with that. And just keep me posted because it's for sure happening. It's like, anyway.
And I live with two, I live with two women who are in a relationship, Yadi and Nevaeh, who are essentially the wall. I have a 3-bedroom house here in Austin. Yadi and Nevaeh, Yadi of Unleash and her girlfriend Nevaeh are in the room right next door. So I listened to them. There was moments when they first moved in and I would hear the moaning and them orgasming, and I would be like, this isn't fair. Because here's my best girlfriend who's now pleasuring with another girl. I'm like, why do I get left out of this experience? And at the same time, I'm not drawn to recreate that, but it's like, it was like a funny moment of like, look, they get to have orgasms.
Oh my God, I love that. So I didn't even know Yadi was anyhow. Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
I love
they're starting a podcast called Finding Daddy, because Nevaeh would like to have a baby, and they're two women. So the podcast is them exploring how they bring this baby into their life and where do they get the dad and to have a child and create the family. So Finding Daddy podcast.
Oh, interesting. So interesting. Yeah. We all just have our things, and who knows any of it? Like, that's one thing that I've, frankly kind of enjoyed sounds messed up, but during and after the pandemic, just it was so extreme that no matter what your plans were, it's like my mom would say, we make plans and God laughs, right? So just whatever our plans were, you just can never know. So you have to do the thing that's like true for you, you know, because whatever the plans are, if that's not true for you, you're barking up a tree that could or could not even be in existence tomorrow. So I love that. I don't know. I just love to see the people who are in the space of really, really deeply like living what's true for them. You know?
Mm-hmm. And then, you never know what's going to come from that experience. And you're going to meet what the next adventure is. Yeah,
you never know what'll happen when you get a download in a breathwork class. And then
so two more things that I want to cover before we wrap this. One is I'm going to start with this. We're going to put a pin in this one, but I definitely want to end with hearing what's coming for Held. But before we go there, you had mentioned before starting this podcast that this idea of authority versus expertise. Mm-hmm. And I found that personally interesting to share because I think that was coming from a space of like, who am I to speak to this particular topic? Mm-hmm. And I can relate to that feeling in some way. And I had this experience recently, and I'm just gonna vent for a moment. And it's coming from a space of love for the world. It's not to shame any one particular person. However, you know, the LA Mag article, Shop and Shag, which is single shop at Air One, was the catalyst for a story that was featured on the cover of LA Mag. And I recently had posted about that, and I reached out to the author of that article to thank her so much because she weaved me through the story, ending with, you know, that, you know, by the end of it, she bought into Christina's mission of inspiring more meaningful relationships as the solution to all the world's problems. And so when I reached out to her to thank her for it, she said, "Oh my God, Christina, that story was a mess. You have no idea. I almost quit. They wanted to turn it into a pickup. They wanted to turn it into like a pickup story." And she had to argue with them. And inside the story, in the magazine version, there's a little like additional column beside it that's Patty Stinger's 6 pieces of dating advice. And I read those 6 pieces of dating advice, and the first one was decent, but then the rest of the 5 pieces was just like, ugh. Like one of the pieces of advice I remember specifically was like, be normal. Like normal people get dates and meet their match. Don't try to, like, it was like, don't be unique. And another one was like, get out of your neighborhood, go date in other neighborhoods. And I'm like, okay, well, I get that. But like, also too is, you know, go to your grocery store, smile to people, like right in Venice. Like she was saying, like, if you live in Venice, don't be afraid to go to Calabasas, or if you're in West Hollywood, go down to Manhattan Beach. And I'm like, well, there's people right around you. Bonds build best over time. Say hi to your neighbor. So I had giggled back in my message to the writer about that Patty Stinger piece. And she was like, oh my God, Christina, you have no idea. She had a whole NGO type of piece that was supposed to go where they put the Patty Stingers of how couples were meeting doing NGO work. And they threw that aside. Wow. And so then there was like looking at also the photo in the Patty Stinger in that column. And it was like, does she even look like that? So I ventured over to her Instagram. And if you pull up Patty Stinger's Instagram right now, it is like another person. Like the filter. Hey, I will admit, I use FaceApp. I use FaceApp like level 1, level 2, sometimes at most, but always level 1, level 2. I don't really change it. So it doesn't, I think my pictures pretty much look like me on Instagram. And it's just like it tweaks the lighting a little bit. It's like maybe adds a little eye makeup to me. But Patty Stinger's it's like a whole other human being. And on it, are you looking right now?
Mm-hmm.
And on it, there's like this one image of her and her new boyfriend that it says that she met him on Tinder, which maybe Tinder's the sponsor of that, and that she met him because she was doing her own guided meditations and wearing her pheromones that she's created. And I remember a decade ago when I first started working in dating, and I met people who were a part of the Matchmaking Institute, and, you know, they were the ones training all the matchmakers. And Patty Stinger was like she was representing the Matchmaking Institute too. And some of the things that they were teaching people it was so disheartening for me. I think that I stayed in this industry a little bit because I was like, these people cannot be the ones representing and supporting and guiding people through the most intimate journey of our life's love, and through this tender experience of dating. And through that experience is like, it is to really discover who you are as a person and be your own authentic self and share that. And so I was just so kind of looking at Patty's Instagram confused. There was this like level of confusion. Like, I'm so confused. People are going to her for dating advice, but this looks so inauthentic. Like, I've seen pictures of who she is, and this is like inauthentic, and it's confusing to the message and to the world to like be. So for me, it's like, I have this like authority versus expertise. It's like these certification programs, someone just makes them all up. Like, these are all human made constructs that we are part of the ethers. And if you have a genius of picking up information and you're really distilling it from a place of love, and I see you, Aviva, like, you are like in your own journey, and you're walking the talk, but you're authentic and you're real, and you have the expertise and the authority and the experience to do all that. So I couldn't help but when you brought that up pre-podcast to be like, oh my God, this is my time to vent about what we have the perceived Patty Stinger, over 1 million people following her. And like, here you and I, which have like under 10,000 people on like our Instagrams.
Yeah, well under for me. But that's also not been my focus. But yeah, I'm curious if there's a particular question, and I'm also happy just to speak to it in general.
Well, this particular question was, you brought up authority versus expertise.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. No, and I'm glad that you asked, because this is another conversation and this feels like a really edgy, vulnerable conversation for me. And it's something that I think we should be having more, especially those of us who are in spaces where we're trying to do something new, and we're trying to create like new conversations and new modalities, or whatever we may want to call it. But for me, when I look at others who are in similar kind of spaces, or who do things that are related to what I do, and they have a PhD, or they're a researcher of these things, because I'm very heady sometimes. So they're a researcher of something, or they have multiple certifications in this, that, or the other, to your point, or they've written books, and they've done all these different things. And it's that the thoughts that I have around like, who am I to be doing this? Again, I'm just a girl that got a download in a breathwork class and started doing workshops, and then they started going someplace, and people seem to be getting good results, right? And like loving it. But I'm just like that. I don't even know massage, like, you know, and so it does make me question when I think about that, when I'm thinking about like, oh, I'm going on a podcast. What am I even going to talk about? What do I have to to offer in this space? Who am I to I'm not an expert in air quotes about this stuff. And then the thought, and this was actually the first time that I said it that way. I've never thought about it as expertise and authority before. So it's perfect that we're having this conversation. Obviously, it's meant to be, because this is the first time I ever brought it up. The idea of authority, and I actually just had to look it up while we were talking about this. The idea being of authority. Just going to read a couple of the things, and it's the power or right to give orders or make decisions. It's freedom from doubt, belief in yourself and your abilities. There's things around like official permission or approval or things like that. But the idea, as opposed to expertise, which is, because there was a definition of that I thought was interesting just to compare, was skillfulness by virtue of possessing special knowledge, right? Which also is important, but it's very much about having a special knowledge, going like deep with that thing, and not saying that that's not true. But when I apply expertise to external validation, to an external source telling me that I have enough expertise, enough special knowledge to be able to do something, it makes me, frankly, kind of insecure about it and questioning myself. But when I look at the results of what I've done and am doing, and who I am in the world, and what where I explore, where I take from a lot of different places and am able to create something that's uniquely my own and that people seem to respond to, that's where I feel like, no, I can have this authority. Yeah. I have this authority because I'm doing it, because I'm me, because it's in a way of being, that I know what I know. And I know that there's a lot that I don't know. But I'm in the inquiry, and in the inquiry, I think more than most, and certainly more than those who are coming to me. So I do have something to offer. I think is kind of where I'm coming from with it. And then with respect to what you were saying about Patty or other experts, I feel similarly, in a little bit of a different way, but just in, kind of hesitate to say this because I don't mean this against anyone in particular, but I do think that certain modalities, certain ways of doing things feel very rote to me. That there are certain exercises that people do, or like with Patty, there's certain advice that people give, right? That is like the way to do it. Again, air quotes. And it just feels so contrived, and it feels so inauthentic and so not resonant with me. Like, I don't like going to human connection events. Like, frankly, I don't like, once I'm there, there's a lot of great stuff, and there can be, but like, and I do like a lot of them, but I have to push myself to do it because there is, if there's anything that feels inauthentic or that feels forced or that feels kind of rote, that human part of me that just wants to be and be expressed and connect and just like love on another human. I want that to be able to be expressed, and I feel like it's similar for you, that your intention is pure and you want people to like genuinely, you have a vision for how you want to see the world and how you want to see people relating, and not saying that it's capital R right, not saying that it's the only one, but it is yours. Right. Mm-hmm. And you are doing that. And that gives you the authority to lead for those who are aligned with your vision, mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm on the journey of really continuing to step into. Mm-hmm. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and feel that in myself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like I see of you're the authority of your own expertise.
Hmm.
And because here's the thing, is like we're all humans, we're brought to this earth and somebody had to write it down, like write some things down, but they made it up. Everything's been made up.
Mm-hmm.
We've all made it up in some way, and just some people made it up before, and then we start following the people who did, because we're building on pre-existing materials, and we're learning from and using them. Thank goodness. I actually, with somebody like Patty Stinger, or, there's even Dr. Pat Allen. Dr. Pat Allen wrote the book, Getting to I Do, and a few other books. And she's, I think, in her 90s now. She used to host these first Monday monthly meetings at like a hotel in Culver City, and 70 or so people would come, and she does live coaching, but it's very standard. There's like a masculine energy and a feminine energy, and this is what you do, and this is what you do. And she would like speed coach each people through. And I had a friend, actually Napoleon, who's part of the We Deepen community. He tells the story in one of the episodes of the podcast, because I was so, fascinated by it. But he booked a session with Dr. Pat Allen, who's she's a renowned psychologist, author to many books. They only booked a 30-minute session, and he was like, wait, I think I need more time. He's like, no, she only does 30 minutes. So he goes in and he meets with her, and he said, I'm having a problem. I'm married and I'm find myself looking at other women. What do I do? And she said, oh, well, you either go get a sex worker, have an experience with a sex worker, or have an affair. He's like, I highly recommend that you go the sex worker route, because it's less strings attached and it's more easier. But that was the solution. Wow. And she was like, that's only, I understand this is only like 8 minutes. So I'm happy to reimburse you for the additional 15 minutes. And he's like, wait, what? That's it? And she's like, yeah, that's it. That's done. And that was it. That was what was prescribed to him. Like, this is what you go do. He left there. He did. I think he said he did one or both of those things. His marriage ended up falling apart. And that was it. But
shocking.
Her belief was that humans aren't monogamous. So stop it and go satiate your needs. But there was obviously stuff deeper within his relationship that was not addressed in that less than 15 minutes period of time. And so these, I think that our generation, we received beautiful lessons and information from those who came before us. And now we're getting to rise and build on top of that. And we are the only ones that can individually create authority about our own expertise. Like, yes, during COVID, I went back and I got my certification. I did a year-long program to get certified in coaching, but I also was coaching before then. I did feel like it elevated my skills to some extent. And I help people with their love lives. And there is a thing sometimes of I'm dating, but I consider myself at this moment in time currently single. And that's a little insecurity that I have of like, who am I to coach somebody through this period of this when I'm currently single? And I can also look at, I have a resume of dating experience. Like, I've dated more than most people have dated and have these stories. And so God, gave me this curriculum that was customized for me to, it's like, you can go to school and study it, or you can venture through life and God will show you the way. And that's essentially what he provided for all of those who actually wrote the books and the research, is where the information even came from in the first place, was through people living their lives. So through you living your life, that is, and also living your life in a way that is purpose driven, is actually what's provides you with the accelerated expertise inside of the field of what you're most curious about and interested in, and to then share that information with other people, because that's what's actually supporting the expansion or the evolution of humanity, is you receiving that information and sharing that with others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. That's beautifully said. And what I would say to that, and what came up for me as you were speaking, is just, if you feel called to something, you genuinely feel called to something, and act in alignment with that, like follow that, as opposed to whatever the other motivations might be and whatever ego things might come into the picture. That I'll speak from that I know for a fact, to my bones, what I absolutely do know is that nobody's going to do this like I do. That this, what I'm creating, needs to exist in the world, like gets to exist, that there's a purpose for it, and that nobody's going to do it like I do. And if I don't do it, it's not going to exist, and it needs to exist. Therefore, I must do it. Which means that whatever has to happen for me to be able to do that, for me to be able to get the skills and or the confidence and or the people and whatever, for me, and this actually goes into just what my vision is for it is, and I think this is, again, looking back, has to do with my experience just with brand marketing, PR, that I see how creating Held as a brand. And when people say to me, like, Held, oh, that's such a great name, I'm like, thanks. I didn't come up with it. I didn't come up with any of this, but building it as a brand that stands for this kind of connection, compassion, being present with one another, holding space, holding each other, like being softer, better humans with each other, right? And I'm still working out what the details of this is and how it lives, et cetera. But building it as something that represents that, so that conversation can be opened, and it normalizes it. It's like the way that meditation was thought of as like weird back in the days. And then some folks, I mean, one of whom I happened to know and was there for the early meditations that she used to do at Soho House, and made it like cool. And the kids who were coming there to just be productive and like make more money in the world, but wound up socializing with each other. And then, New York Times articled later, some other things. I'm not saying that's totally responsible for it by any stretch, but we have to, yoga, meditation. Now you can throw a rock in LA and hit a sound bath or breath work, right? So I see this as being like that. And there's just no one who's put a stake in the ground. I shouldn't say there's no one, but this is just where I feel my unique stake in the ground is around Held, what that gets to represent. I want to do brand partnerships. I'm envisioning doing, potentially, fingers crossed, if anybody's listening, a Held summer tour. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it can be pop-up experiences and activations across the country, whatever that might be. I can see a book. I see a certification program where people who are practitioners of other things, so a yoga instructor or someone who leads groups or whatever, can just bring in Held practices into what they're doing. Like, it's just something that can supplement and augment and be woven in, such that it spreads the message. I don't need to be the person. Like, I'm not interested in being like the person. No, that sounds like a lot of work and a lot of stress, and I'm not into that. I like my naps, but like creating ways for it to be spread. I have a game, like I've already created that. Who knows? Maybe this game will become a thing. It's like a card oriented thing, and there are so many ways that this can come to life. And so I'm trying to be in a space of openness to what emerges and what's in alignment with what lights me up and feels like a yummy creative expression. So you're seeing this all in the very early days. I feel like a toddler talking about, how I'm going to run marathons one day, but as soon as I learn to walk properly. But that's the vision.
I love this. I want to put you and Yadi of Unleashed into a room, because both of you, your experiences, came into fruition, and hers Unleashed, yours Held in 2018. And both of
I
you are
remember.
in this space of like looking at it and how does this actually reach more people and what does it become, and being able to support that. I'm so grateful and honored to be able to support this journey. And so on Held in particularly in Los Angeles, and I think you mentioned some New York, you're going to continue to do Helds for community.
Yeah. So I decided to take on March as my own personal March Madness, and see what would happen as an experiment if I did a Held every Friday and people knew that they could rely on that. So every Friday of March, and it's a 5-week month because I'm brilliant like that. Not, but to do that, and then some piece of social media content, even if it's just sharing something every day, because I had been very social media averse. So working on that in large part because I need to get the message out, right?
Yeah.
If I don't, nobody's going to know. I had to be told that it's not promotion. I'm not trying to sell anybody. I'm like letting people know this exists. So if they want or need it, like they know it's there. Anyway, but so every Friday in March, I'll do April schedule is a little bit TBD. I think it's going to be at least on the 21st, Friday the 21st, potentially the 14th. If I can find locations. I mean, one of the big things is finding spaces for just every
spaces
time.
like homes. It could be a home. It can be an event space, community space.
So I only did them in private homes, like for the first, 2 years or whatever, homes, and then a couple clubhouses, and then did some like private events, festivals, conferences. But homes are great. I've only recently in this go round in March have done 2, it'll now be 3 event spaces, potentially in talks with a breathwork and meditation oriented studio, yoga studio. Like it just needs to be a space where people can come, feel cozy, where I can throw down pillows either that they have or that I'm bringing, and where they can just be comfortable and can accommodate like 12 to 15 people. If I had the spaces lined up, I would line things up on the calendar, find the spaces, and then able to have my sharing / promotion / communications engine in place. Cause again, it's just exhausting for me. I don't.
Please, and collaborate with We Deepen. Start in some of your posts as you're doing. Definitely add We Deepen as a collaboration, because we're in a similar, like I'm waiting to get my social media person. I just hired an assistant. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that's going to all work out and we'll go from there. I'm so proud of you.
Smart girl. Thank you. It's a very stretchy, beautiful journey. I wouldn't trade it. I'm super grateful that I'm able to do it. I'm super grateful that I have brand work that can support me like financially, while I really focus on like the heart and love of and energy of building this.
And people can go to weareheld.com and on Instagram at weareheld, and I will tag you in the description so they'll be able to find you there as well.
Fabulous. Lovely. Yes.
I want to leave with a quote that, or it's I guess a phrase that I saw on.
Wait a second. Wait, before you leave with the quote, because you're making me think. There's one last thing.
Tell
before
us.
Your quote, because it's also kind of a quote, is that I would just encourage, if you're at all interested, if you're listening, world out there, there's a meditation that I've started, at least sometimes bringing into Held, and that I really want to make a practice and encourage. I'm a huge fan of all of the loving kindness kind of meditation practices. And there's one that's this just like me meditation. You can look it up online, look it up on YouTube if you want. I can give you a link to a version that I like that's on YouTube. But what's so beautiful about it is that you go through kind of these fundamental aspects of the human experience, bringing someone or someone's to mind, and recognizing that shared humanity experience. So you go through them, and it's like, just like me, this person experiences insecurity and loneliness, and just like me. They want to belong, or they want to be happy, and then going through that. I wish them health and well-being and that at the end. It's just a beautiful, beautiful practice. And I want to spread it through the world. Okay. That's my soapbox. Carry on with your quote. Yes.
Well, I do love the idea of that meditation, and just like me is interesting. I've been bonding a friend of mine as a public figure, a well-known public figure, and on his phone he has like the QR code with his contact information. And I was like, do you just give that out to people? And he's like, oh yeah, I do, but no one ever uses it. They assume. He said they assume that I'm too busy. So it's interesting from to think about the dissonance that we have between who we are and someone else's. Like, we create stories about who they are, even though they may not be true. So the idea of like, everybody wants a friend, everybody's open for friendship in some way. I mean, yeah, sure, there's times in our life where we don't have the bandwidth to take any new person in. And the idea of being friendly to people, like, we all want that friendly outreach that just is sincere and open. So yeah, just like me.
I mean, I say, if I can have people have warm interactions with like the bodega guy and not get mad if someone cuts them off in traffic, and like wish them well, and give someone a compliment that is a tiny, tiny act on your behalf and makes their day, or someone a hug when they really need it. Like, if that can be the legacy I leave, you can take me out. I'm fine. Like, I'm most likely not going to wind up having children. And so if there's something that I can leave behind where I did some sort of good in this world, it is that. So, yeah. Okay. You got a little bit of tears out of me. Anyway.
I love you. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in the world. It's really important. It is important. And I feel your heart and your passion behind it. And that's where the tears are coming from, is that you have a deep mission. And for everybody listening to be able to support that and rally behind that. This episode before is with Christopher Life, who's the founder of the Independent National Convention, which is a political movement. And who would have thought I would be like, I've never voted before. So it's now I'm involved in bringing the Love and Politics panel to the Independent National Convention. But it's like, when you see these people and they're doing this, like, I don't have the bandwidth to do what you're doing, but I can support what you're doing. And if we can all collaborate and rally behind, like, I don't have the bandwidth to go and infiltrate politics on my own right now. But if you're going to take that job, I'll rally behind you and do it, so we can essentially work together, because we all, I think, are people within the quote unquote conscious community that's been going to Burning Man and seeing the world differently. We all know what's possible. And to even speak a little bit more of like, my bringing up Patty Stinger is not to shame her. She's a product of a generation, and also one that's fearful of aging, because they have been celebrated for being on these big screens and being perfect. And so, I don't want it to come across as that. We've seen another way. There is another way available to us. Yeah. Thank you, Aviva.
Absolutely.
And to leave with that, to end with this this message. So I was rented out an Airbnb years ago in Los Angeles with Believe, who was one of my advisors at that time. And there on the wall in this Airbnb was this message that it just reminds me of when you were speaking of, like, it's like speaking to you, it's speaking to us. I imagine it's speaking to someone listening to me. This message says, there's a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, It will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It's your business to keep it yours. It's your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You have to keep yourself open, aware to the urges that motivate you. Keep the channel open. No artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There is only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others.
Chills. Just chills to the core. Thank you. I'm wondering, is that from Big Magic by any chance?
It was literally just handwritten on a wall with no person who even
Wow.
in a pin. And what I really appreciate is like, you don't even have to believe it. Like, you just get out of the way.
Absolutely.
You don't even have to think you're good at it.
Withheld. That's so good. Okay, can you put that in the show notes?
I definitely will.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, love. And if you're listening, definitely do go to the We Deepen calendar and see all of the upcoming held experiences.
Yes.
And if you don't see any there, go to weareheld.com and send Aviva a message and ask her when the next one's going to be.
Yes. Oh, and sign up on the email list. That way you actually will at least for sure have it in your spam folder. No, hopefully it makes it somewhere. All right.
Thank you, Aviva. Thank you all for tuning into another episode of Deepen with Christina. Again, if you did enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, rate it, leave a comment, send it to a friend. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to do it. Until next time, enjoy. Bye for now.